For some reason, Democratic governors and mayors are adamant on keeping the lockdown going in spite of the science proving that we need to make serious changes, in spite of the UN warning us of starvation. And for some reason, YouTube has been censoring and deleting videos from people who present that science. Don't ask me why, but it is very creepy. Well, now we have this story. Doctors raise alarm about health effects of continued coronavirus shutdown, mass casualty incident. More than 600 doctors signed onto a letter sent to President Trump Tuesday, pushing him to end the national shutdown aimed at slowing the spread of the coronavirus, calling the widespread state orders keeping businesses closed and kids home from school a mass casualty incident with exponentially growing health consequences. What more do we need? I risk getting deleted every single time I talk about this. Every single time. There was a doctor recently, and it was a calm and rational discourse between a doctor and a host. And this was very mainstream. It was tempered. It was reasonable. And they said, we need to, very, very much similar to what I say. YouTube deleted the video. And then they said something about harmful content. If we can't even have doctors, this guy was like a high ranking World Health Organization advisor, mind you. If we can't even have these doctors on YouTube, what's really happening? I'm telling you this now. I do not believe at this point that Democrats are keeping the lockdowns going because of the virus. Let me clarify that. What I mean is, I think it's not about the science, about what we need to do. It's about their fear that if they open things up and things get bad, they'll be blamed for it. So the best course of action is just to be heavy-handed and use all the power at their disposal to not allow a reopening so that no one can ever blame them. Then finally, when they're forced to reopen, they can say, oh, I'm being forced to reopen. Oh, no. And if things get bad, then it's not on them. But I'll show you something crazy. We'll come back to the story about the doctors. This is why I'm leaving New Jersey. I'm in South Jersey in the Philly area. I've talked about this quite a bit in the past couple of days, but I'm going to relocate my business. Police interrupt business owner as she was selling items on Facebook Live. Her business was shuttered. She couldn't sell anything to anyone. She has since announced that she will be permanently closing. She was online streaming the products in her store, and people could order online. And the police came and said, no, we are shutting you down. What does that have to do with the pandemic? I would like some serious, nothing. The cops come to the door and they said, ma'am, you have to close. And she goes, we are closed. Can't you read the sign? And he was like, no, you're online. And Amazon is online. Why did they shut her down? I can't tell you, man. But it is highly, highly suspect. Back over the doctor's story, they say this. The letter outlines a variety of consequences the doctors have observed resulting from the coronavirus shutdowns, including patients missing routine checkups that could detect things like heart problems or cancer, increases in the substance and alcohol abuse, and increases in financial instability that could lead to poverty and financial uncertainty, which is closely linked to poor health. Quote, we are alarmed at what appears to be the lack of consideration for the future health of our patients, the doctors say in their letter. The downstream health effects are being massively underestimated and underreported. This is an order of magnitude error. The letter continues. The millions of casualties of a continued shutdown will be hiding in plain sight, but they will be called alcoholism, homelessness, suicide, heart attack, stroke, or kidney failure. In youths, it will be called financial instability, unemployment, despair, drug addiction, unplanned pregnancies, poverty, and abuse. Because the harm is diffuse, there are those who would hold that it does not exist. We, the undersigned, know otherwise. Not that long ago, 2 doctors came out and said basically the same thing. YouTube deleted the video. The people have spoken. In Virginia, in New York, they're defying these orders. Why are these businesses being forced to remain closed? Why is it that these doctors are now coming out and saying this, yet de Blasio, Cuomo, and other governors still say no? They don't want to reopen. The letter comes as the battle over when and how to lift coronavirus restrictions continues to rage on cable television, in the courts, in protests, and among government officials. Those for lifting the restrictions have warned about the economic consequences of keeping the shutdowns in effect. Those advocating a more cautious approach say that having more people out and about will necessarily end with more people becoming infected, causing what National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease expert Fauci warned in a Senate hearing last week would be preventable suffering and death. Except we don't see that in South Dakota or Florida. We don't see that in many other states. So perhaps Fauci is wrong. He was wrong before. He could be wrong again, and that's a bannable offense. But Fauci's in a video that went viral where he said, don't wear masks. Now he's saying, wear masks? Look, I get it, man. I'll take his advice for sure. I think we all should. But I also think we need to recognize there are other doctors that are speaking up. 600 or so have signed this letter. But these doctors point to others that are suffering, not from the economy or the virus, but simply from not being able to leave home. The doctor's letter lists a handful of patients by their initials and details their experience. Patient ES is a mother with 2 children whose office job was reduced to part-time and whose husband was furloughed. The father is drinking more, the mother is depressed and not managing her diabetes well, and the children are barely doing any schoolwork. Patient AF has chronic but previously stable health conditions. Her elective hip replacement was delayed, which caused her to become nearly sedentary, resulting in a pulmonary embolism in April. Dr. Mark McDonald, a psychiatrist, noted in a conversation with Fox News that a 31-year-old patient of his with a history of depression who was attending school to get a master's degree in psychology died about 2 weeks ago from a fentanyl overdose. He blames the government-imposed shutdown. She had to stay in her apartment, essentially in house arrest, as most people here in Los Angeles were for weeks and weeks. She could not see her therapist. She could not speak to the therapist over the phone, but she could speak to the therapist over the phone, but she couldn't see her in person. She could not attend any of her group meetings, which were helping her to maintain her abstinence from opiates, and she relapsed into depression. She was just too withdrawn to ask for help. McDonald continued before noting that due to regulations, only 6 people could be at her funeral. She was simply trying to escape from her pain. I do blame these actions by the government for her death. I got to say to these doctors, I'm sorry. Donald Trump doesn't have the power to force these governments to reopen. He doesn't. The states have the power. But who do they write to? The individual governors who won't listen, who refuse? Fox News asked McDonald, as well as 3 other doctors who were involved with the letter, if they thought the indirect effects of the shutdowns outweighed the likely direct consequences of lifting them. The preventable suffering and death Fauci referred to in last week's Senate hearing. All 4 said they believe they do. Quote, the very initial argument, which sounded reasonable 3 months ago, is that in order to limit the overwhelmed patient flux into hospitals that would prevent adequate care, we needed to spread out the infections and thus the deaths in specific locales that could become hotspots, particularly New York City. It was a valid argument at the beginning based on the models that were given. What we've seen now over the last 3 months is that no city, none, 0, outside of New York, has even been significantly stressed. McDonald is referring to the misconception that business closures and stay-home orders aimed at flattening the curve are meant to reduce the total number of people who will fall ill because of the coronavirus. Rather, these curve-flattening measures are meant largely to reduce the number of people who are sick at any given time, thus avoiding a surge in cases that overwhelms the healthcare system and causes otherwise preventable deaths because not all patients are able to access life-saving critical care. And now patients are not able to access life-saving critical care because of the closures, no less. McDonald said that hospitals are not only not overwhelmed, they're actually being shut down. He noted that at one hospital in Los Angeles area where Dr. Simone Gold, the head organizer of the letter, works, the technicians in the ER have been cut by 50%. We've already seen stories over 1 million healthcare workers have been laid off or furloughed. So what is happening? Why are the cops going to a small business selling things online when Amazon is selling things online? Amazon's got videos of their products. Amazon sends out deliveries. Why shut down the small business? I seriously would like real answers. Quote, when you look at the data of the deaths and the critically ill, they are patients who are very sick to begin with. There's always exceptions, but when you look at the pure numbers, it's overwhelmingly patients who are in nursing homes and patients with serious underlying conditions. Meaning, that's where our resources should be spent. I think it's terribly unethical. Part of the reason why we let the coronavirus fly through the nursing homes is because we're diverting resources across society at large. We have limited resources. We should put them where it's killed people. People of all ages, of course, have been shown to be able to catch the coronavirus. And there have been reported health complications in children that could potentially be linked to the disease. Fauci also warned about assuming that children are largely protected from the effects of the virus. We don't know everything about the virus, especially when it comes to children, Fauci said. We ought to be careful and not cavalier. I agree, 100%. 100% agree. I think a lot of the anger aimed at Fauci is misplaced. I think he's just another doctor. He works in the government. He's got his opinions. He gives his opinions, but he's not a doctor Or I should say he's not an economist. He's not a specialist. I was going to say he's not a doctor of the economy. He's not someone who specializes in what this means in terms of how people will eat, whether or not their mental health will be affected. And so I think he's giving good advice as it pertains to the virus itself. I defer to him. Now we look at the bigger picture. Now we look at doctors being laid off, unemployed people, depression, suicide, drug abuse, and starvation. And we have to weigh those now against the coronavirus. A smart person would do this. Unfortunately, it seems to be New York, it seems to be California, Michigan, that want to remain closed in various ways. Now, California, I believe, is doing a better job than Michigan and New York. They're slowly starting to reopen, and all states now, I believe, are slowly initiating a reopening procedure. But I think the reason the Democratic governors don't want to do it is it comes down to a fear they'll be blamed, but it's also partisanship. And that's about the blame. It's right. I want them to vote for me in the future, so I better just do what they want. That's dangerous. We'll see if this letter means anything, because I don't think Trump can do anything anyway, but I'll leave it there. Stick around. I got one more segment coming up for you in a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.